Over 20 Filipinos working at a cruise ship docked in Norfolk, Virginia, have been deported for allegedly engaging in child pornography.
They say more than 20 lawfully working Filipino cruise workers were wrongfully detained and deported.
At sobrang injustice po ng ginagawa nila sa amin.
4 o 5 oras na nag-init na chinecheck nila yung cellphone ko pero wala silang makita.
Bumagsak na ho lahat ng pangarap eh. Hindi ko na ho alam kung paano ako mag-start.
You know, they're family members. They have children and spouses, and you know, and to know like the whole journey that it took for them to actually like get on those jobs, how hard they worked, and how hard they worked on the cruise.
With this case of detention and deportation, that not just her, but really more than 100 seafarers have experienced.
Yeah, the hardships and being stigmatized for a story that has never been verified. They were not, with no evidence and all that.
From February 2025, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, began boarding the Carnival Sunshine, which sails out of Port of Norfolk in Virginia, intercepting Filipino crew members during protocols. On June 28th, at least 18 Filipino crew members, non-charged or tried, were arrested while docked. They held valid visas, but were accused of possessing child pornography. They were deported. Ex-crew members have reported poor conditions during detention, no food and no water, denial of legal counsel or embassy contact, and unclear explanations for actions taken against them. And so, of course, Filipino American advocacy groups, one of the leaders is really PwC, have condemned the removals as unlawful and demanded transparency. And according to PwC, a total of 21 crew from Carnival Sunshine were deported between April 13 and July 12, and 80 more from Carnival ships sailing from Port Canaveral were also deported during that period for suspected but unproven offenses. I'm happy that these two are able to join us today on the show to give us more information about our kababayans, the seafarers, but then also the bigger issue behind this. Executive Director of Filipino Workers Center. I served with her also on the Los Angeles County Commission for Women. Aquilina Soriano, an esteemed member of the Filipino American community here in Southern California and in the U.S. really. Aki, thank you for making time. I know you're very busy.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, and so that we can talk about this really important issue that has gone under the radar for months.
Yes.
Because really these workers, they don't have ties here. Their families are still in the Philippines, so they really didn't have anyone to reach out to, and those that they weren't getting any help with. So.
Right. So, and Myrla Baldonado joins Aquilina today. Myrla has been closely in touch with those that are directly affected. Aki, this is concerning. Let me first get, you have been a long time a leader of Filipino Americans and also a long-time voice for those who are not heard, for those without a voice, for migrant workers, for OFWs, documented and undocumented. What are your initial thoughts on this?
They weren't picked up all at once. It was between 1 and 9 workers that were picked up almost every time they would dock, at least twice a month. So it's
a growing number. Yeah.
numbers and fear. Every time that they would dock, they would have such fears of who else would be taken. They wouldn't know. I mean, CBP has been boarding, the ship previously to this, and there have been some deportations, but our reports of this, the way that they're deporting in this manner has really began this year. And I believe the official count is like 22 from the count of our context, and that there may be a couple more that are not Filipinos who also have been taken off. For us, it was a really heartbreaking story. Like, we heard the testimony and just what happened to these workers and how they were put through this process and humiliated. They were handcuffed, like you said, like no food and water for long periods of time, but also just like really being treated as criminals and without having any charges, without being convicted of anything, and without actually seeing any real evidence against them. I mean, one of the workers, like, what kept him going through all the interrogation was that he and God knew the truth, that it wasn't true, but even though they opened up their phones and let CBP scroll through them and everything, and they cooperated, didn't find anything, still they had their visas revoked, and that also subjected them to 10-year bans of bars, which then means that they're not able to work anymore as on the cruises. And a lot of them had worked for years to actually get into that position, investing in training, certification, and then all of the hoops that they put them through. They already go through so much vetting, background checks, documentation, and then just on an accusation to be given no access to legal services or counsel, and without due process, having their lives devastated like this has been just an injustice. And partly we just really want the world to know what's happening. We really see this as a part of the mass deportation campaign that this administration is conducting, where it has little care for the individuals as humans and little care for their rights.
Myrla, what are you seeing out there? What are they saying? What are some of the stories that are jumping at you?
Yeah, the hardships and being stigmatized for a story that has never been verified. They were not, with no evidence and all that. And they were very sure because before they leave the ports of Manila, they knew that this would be a problem because it's been happening for a while, as far back as November. So they all know that.
That's really sad, and that's really telling, Aki, you right. Even before you leave, you already know that it could happen to you, and still they go. What is Carnival's role in this as a big company trying to protect and support their employees?
So one, the workers also, a lot of them, once they arrived in the Philippines after being deported, would go back to Carnival, and Carnival just says they're terminated. And if they try and apply anywhere else, because of the way that their visas were revoked, they're not able to get it, and they're red flagged, even though they haven't been convicted of anything. Carnival's official position is that this isn't a law enforcement issue and not an immigration issue, which of course we beg to differ, because there is no charges. And it's true that there is like an ongoing investigation that they have, and that there have been actual cases. But when there are cases and they have evidence, they actually prosecute, and they convict. And so it's not deportation, it's actually prison time, and through that process, there is the ability to, have lawyers and, and to argue your side, have due process. But
that's not happening here.
That's not happening here. That's not what's happening. They aren't being charged. They aren't being convicted of anything. So we think that is just not a valid argument, and that they should be doing more to protect their employees, who are the ones who create the experiences, right, that make them so successful. PwC, we are a part of the lawsuit also against ICE for their violations of our community's rights, racial profiling, arrests with no probable cause, no access to legal counsel, really, violations of our Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. So we've seen it firsthand how this administration is really trying to meet these numbers, these quotas, by violating rights. And this is another way that they are doing it, and that it's been, again, under the radar,
Now the attention is on this case, and now you're finding out more, that there's more, and that there's different cruise lines, and then there's different ships. Can you give us an overview of that?
Since this has come out, and there has been a little bit of coverage on it, you know, we've been finding out that it's not an isolated case with this ship, but it is happening like in Florida, in the Great Lakes region, like Detroit, not only with Carnival, but also with Royal Cruise Lines, with Victory Lines, and even Mardi Gras. But so this is really a trend of, you know, happening in many different places. I think, Myrla, you reported to us that already there's another group from Royal Caribbean, about 20 workers who reached out to us. After
23. There's 23 of them, and they've been named.
1 in 4 seafarers, this is Filipino. So we're like one of the largest numbers of seafarers in the world. But this is overwhelmingly Filipinos, and we've just only heard of like a few, you know, maybe from India, or even I think one from Guatemala, like a few who have also been in this, but they're all coming from like the kind of lower ranking positions who are more vulnerable, you know, housekeeping attendants, galley attendants, chefs, who are being targeted here. They said they haven't heard of any supervisors or managers who are being investigated like this. It's overwhelmingly over that 25% representation in this deportation.
So we want the exact numbers, but at the same time, even without the exact numbers, we know that it's overwhelmingly large, right? And then these are livelihoods of Filipinos, basically. And so recently, President Bongbong Marcos Jr. has met with President Trump. Would you know if this has been discussed, or does the president know about this case?
Well, we have reported it to both workers, and Filipino Worker Center has been reporting it to the Philippine Embassy. And we do know that the Office of Migrant Workers also was approached by the workers as well. So we know the government is aware of it, and we think they're just starting to take action on it now. And just because it was lumped together in terms of the accusations of child pornography, that it seemed like that kept them from acting on it. But we really think they should have really investigated on the real situation, because who else but their own country would be defending their rights also in this situation?
What about the U.S. Embassy? Have you gotten in touch? Have they released anything? I know there's a statement, but anything else?
Well, not the embassy, but we have been in touch with Congressman Bobby Scott's office, and reported to him, as well as Senator Kane's. So local politicians here in the United States, his office has made calls to the company, to the Philippine government. They are doing a lot to start this inquiry, and that's going to be important as we start to move different strategies to try, and we want to both stop further deportations in this matter, unjust deportations. We also want to equip the seafarers who are on the boat still now with their rights and with connection to resources, in case, like legal resources, and move the consulates into action. You know, if something does happen in terms of future detentions and deportations. Plus, we also want to restore the visas of those who have been unjustly deported. And so those are things that are possible, but it is going to take a big campaign and effort to make it happen.
We will continue to speak up. We will continue to say names. We will continue to show up and say, we know our rights. We know they have rights. We urge them to know their rights. And we stand here and say, we are not alone. Out of many, we are one. And we will continue to fight, we will continue to organize, and we will continue to demand for the basic dignities that so many of our forebears died for these rights.